Videoing now. I did the evaluation. I'm going to kind of go over for you what happened this morning. And in the evaluation, I find that, as I mentioned this morning, it's a lack of discipline and domination. Okay. So let's say you go to the groomer. When does he start acting up? As soon as you start messing with his face and stuff?
Well, the moment we get in there, he's uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and immediately he's like going for the door. Then I'll give the leash to the groomer. I typically don't stay around
Right.
for it.
So you don't really
But
know.
from what I've seen, it's he'll start squirming pretty immediately. But it'll take it's really only when you start sort of working on either his underside or his face that he
Okay.
turns aggressive.
Okay. All right. So, why does a dog become aggressive? And that's really the question, right? And it's usually because they feel threatened, or you're actually hurting them, or they have learned that it's power. Meaning they barked, you backed away,
Mm-hmm.
fear jumps into the person, dominance jumps into the dog, that becomes the learned behavior. They say it works. So when I talk to you this morning and I can see the type of love that you give him, as again, I'm recapping from this morning, you're reinforcing his ability to be assertive and dominant because you're rewarding his insecurity. So he becomes more insecure. Or you reward the fact that he's telling you what to do. When he's whining and coming up to you and you obey his commands, then you're rewarding him for being assertive. Mm-hmm. You reward him for being dominant and then ultimately aggressive. This guy is insecure yet secure, meaning he's insecure, which causes him to be the way he is because of a genetic factor.
Okay.
He has a genetic predisposition to be like this. But what he learns to do with that genetic predisposition is what he's learned. There are many dogs or people that are born this way,
Okay.
that way, right? It's what they learn to do with it. It's how we relate to them with whatever it is they have, you know? Here's a person that is an A-type personality, and they're assertive, and they're stubborn, and we allow for them to be that way with us. Then we feed it. Right? Mm-hmm. Rather than knowing how to communicate with someone that's like that by checking them on themselves and saying, hey, don't try that stuff with me, mm-hmm. right? Or I'm not going to accept that. Or some form of communication where they understand that you are being very responsible for how they make you feel. Then they can say, okay. And you'll find that person treats you differently than they treat other people. Mm-hmm. Because the fact that the people allow for them to do that, it emboldens them to become more like that. But then, because it's genetic, meaning they're born with it, it's what they learn to do with it. So they say, okay, I'm not going to do it with you, but I'm going to do it with you because you make me feel comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. That's the same thing dogs do. Dogs will be assertive and dominant with maybe a few dogs within a pack, but with specific dogs, they won't be. But genetically, maybe they have a tendency to be dominant, but they're selective with the dominance, right? The problem with dogs that are aggressive with people is that you become a representative of all people.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay? So they say, oh, all people, I'm going to treat them like this. When they do this to me, it works. Because 5 or 6 people jumped, no reason that the 7th person won't jump, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So it becomes a learned behavior. Now, they learn to do that because their owner doesn't discipline and dominate, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're only doing love and affection, they say all people are weak. Okay? All people just want to bow down to me and pet me and call me a good boy, mm-hmm. right? So he says, all right, all people are weak. So when people approach me in a dominant way, I'm going to react and they submit. They back away. So I'm going to continue to do this. So it's up to you now to make that change with him. to show him discipline and domination. Now this morning we did domination. You did it very good. I was very convinced. Most people I'm not convinced.
Okay.
Right? When you make me feel like, whoa, that was pretty good, I know you can do it.
Okay, cool.
Okay? So that's domination. Now, I mentioned this morning there are two fears that human beings are born with. Everything else is learned. Fear of loud noises and fear of falling. Everything else we learn. Okay? It's the same way with animals. So we're going to do loud noises, just like what you did there, to make them feel something other than assertive and dominant. Okay? It's like when your dog comes out, right now he's probably going to be excited. Mm-hmm. That is energy. But it's energy at a certain level. When he's being aggressive, that's also energy, but that's energy at a certain level. Mm-hmm. Right? So what I want is that when the dog is at a level of excitement, but not aggression, that we bring it down.
Okay.
Right? Because if you can't control excited energy, you can't control aggressive energy. Mm-hmm. Right. So we start there.
Okay. That's exactly like when we come home. It's that energy that he has, that we have to come in.
Yeah, you just shut it down. Take him from that excited energy, which is really the cortisol level, is up. And when the adrenaline kicks in, it's up there. And it takes a while before it comes down. But you can manipulate him hormonally, that you can bring it down right away. And it's similar to what you did today. Okay. You want to let him know, I don't want that energy. I want him to feel subordinate in your presence. Doesn't mean that he's not going to love you. Mm-hmm. Because love to them is totally different. Mm-hmm. Love to them means I have a leader that's strong, dominant, makes me feel secure, safe, confident. That's what happens in the wild. There are no leaders kissing and handing out treats and saying good boy. Mm-hmm. Leaders that are leading. And nature says when you find one like that, you follow them to the end. Okay? That means love to them. Now, doesn't mean they don't like the hugging and the kissing and all of that. I mean, that's fine. But there has to be a balance. Mm-hmm. Right? What I'm asking you to do, I don't want you to think or someone to think that this is right or wrong, because in nature there is no right or wrong. There's just balance and imbalance. Right? Same way with life, really. I mean, we give it those terms. But what's good for me may not be good for you. Right? So you might say, oh, that's bad. And I'm like, whoa, that's good. Mm-hmm. Right? If I'm a farmer and you say, hey, I hate rain. And I'm like, I love rain. Right? So it's just whatever balance, whatever works for you. Mm-hmm. So I didn't see any problem with dogs. I mean, I put him with dogs, just like you said. I mean, I knew that wasn't the issue. Mm-hmm. He went out there and smelled, and he was fine with all the dogs. That's not a situation. I think when he was tethered, that's when it happened?
Yeah, typically.
Okay,
yes.
That's what's called fight or flight. He can't flee and move away, mm-hmm. so he stands his ground. Mm-hmm. Okay, that can be dealt with by you controlling how he feels when he becomes anxious. So if he's tethered up and a dog comes towards him, he becomes anxious, and stress develops, and stress leads to aggression. Okay, because he can't flee. But when you start doing the discipline and domination, then he learns how to control that stress. You see? Because when he becomes stressed, that's when he's happy, jumping. You bring him down, then he learns not to go up so far that he has to react aggressively. Okay. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So you are going to practice the discipline and domination indiscriminately in a situation where you would think that he probably would act up. You're going to do it. Okay. Or even if he's not acting up, like what's going to happen when he comes out, I want you to do it anyway so that you can see what that's supposed to look like.
Yeah, great.
Now, I'm going to say this again because I can't say it enough. You may say, oh, I think my dog is depressed. Or you may say, I'm depressed. I'm going to say, wait the 2 weeks. This is tough love. Mm-hmm. If we can get him in a hormonal state for 2 weeks, right, then we can change his habits. They say it takes 21 days for a person to change their habits, but most people don't work on it for 21 days constantly. You're going to be working on this for 10 days constantly with your dog, because I need you to know that you can do what you need to do for him. Mm-hmm. I put him on a table like a grooming table, and I showed how I want you to do it. And you would do this once he's shaved. I want him shaved completely. It's summertime now, it's warm.
Yeah.
And then I want you to go through the motions of grooming him yourself, right? I don't want where you're brushing him and you pull his hair, because that's part of what's happening here. It's pain along with how he feels about people, right? And he's learning this behavior. So I did a little video. We're going to watch it in just a second. And that's what I want from him. I think for at least 2-3 weeks or so, don't worry about grooming him. Just go through the motions of grooming him, right? I want you to do the discipline, the domination, bringing down the cortisol level. And this dog should change. I mean, I know that there's something genetic going on here. Something happened. Let me explain that. A dog can have a genetic predisposition that takes place during the fear imprint period of their life, which is from 5 to 12 weeks of age. So let's say, what does that look like? Let's say I'm walking out this door every day, and one day the air conditioner's on, and he freaks out and doesn't want to walk past the air conditioner during the fear imprint period. If I don't carry him through that, then it stays with him into the socialization period, right? Then there's a whole another set of problems that takes place during the socialization period, because he's out, he's walking around, he's experiencing things. Whereas in the fear imprint period is usually when we don't want to have him with a bunch of dogs, because all the inoculations aren't done, right? So he doesn't have all of his immune system kicked in. So he's not really getting what he's supposed to have. Which really what should happen is during that period he needs to be with other puppies that are going through that same period, so he keeps the socialization going. So let's say he doesn't get it in the fear imprint period, it leads into the socialization period, you don't even realize that that's what's happening, and most people don't, that he had a problem there. And so we just ignore it and we keep moving on with him. Now the dog is an adult at about 5-6 months. We think those are still puppies, but they're adults, and that's who he is, right? And if he's had some aggressive issues, we usually try to stay away from that. And so that's who this dog is. Now, I'm saying, let's go back in time. Okay? Because if this dog, we'll take the thought that if you were to open your door and the jungle was out there and you released him into a jungle where there are other dogs like him, he would find his way to a pack, and he would find where he fits in, and he will do what they tell him to do. And if he tries to step out of that to be assertive or dominant with one that's above him, he's going to put him in his place. And he's going to learn where he is. That one above him is not going to run out to him and kiss him and love him. They're going to say, do you accept me as your leader? Right? Rough him up a bit. He'll submit, and he'll say, okay, I accept. That's what I'm asking you to do. It's called hormone manipulation. We're going to hormonally manipulate the way he feels about certain things. Now, what it's going to look like in the beginning, he's going to respond to that danger. We call it fear. That's what humans say. Oh, he's afraid. Animals, it's not really that it's fear. It's that they're responding to danger, and we call it fear. Fear is usually in the future. Most people are afraid of stuff hasn't even happened. Basically, 99% of the stuff we're afraid of doesn't happen. We're afraid of something that took place 10 years ago, afraid of something that's going to take place next week. Hasn't even happened, right? So it's the danger. When I ask you to do these things, I want him to respond and says, oh, that looks dangerous. I'm going to submit to that. That's perfectly normal. If animals, specifically in the wild, if they didn't respond to that, they would be eaten up, right? If the gazelle didn't recognize the danger of the lion and it stayed there, the lion would eat him up. That danger makes him run. He remembers what he smells like. He remembers the territory. They stay away from that. So that's what I need you to see. When he's sitting there and he's probably shaking, two things are happening. The reactivity of his nervous system is up to begin with. He may have a bit of a genetic problem with that. That's why we look at him and we say, oh, he's so cute, he's afraid. I want to love him. But he's not really afraid. That's his genetic system. Chihuahuas do that. Um, Greyhounds do that. A lot of dogs have that genetic shape to them.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that they're afraid. So he may be like that, and he's trying to figure it out because he feels like prey now.
Mm-hmm.
He's not feeling like a predator,
Right.
feeling like prey. And as I mentioned this morning, how do we control a predator? Is by making him feel like prey. You got to look up that thing I told you.
I did actually.
Did you see it?
I saw, yeah.
It's crazy, right?
It's crazy. Like,
Right.
Just with confidence, they just like walked toward. There's 3 bushmen, just walked towards this group of 15 lions
Right.
in Africa eating a gazelle. 3 bushmen just walk up to them, scared them away. Like the main guy was like scared, ran away. Everybody else followed. And they just like were watching. Guys just cut off a flank and walked away.
Yeah.
Like, it was insane.
Right.
Like, just scared
How
away.
do we control a predator? By making them feel like prey.
Uh-huh.
Because that wasn't their food source, they weren't really familiar with them.
Mm-hmm.
To have something walking towards them like that,
Mm-hmm.
at that specific pace, they freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm talking about. It's called hormone manipulation. This is a hormone, pheromone, testosterone game. If you know how to play it, you can do anything you want to do. If you try to approach it through training, sit, stay, come, heal, you're going to mess the whole thing up because training is revolved around positive reinforcement. And positive reinforcement, the way we do it, doesn't even exist in nature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Nature says, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this. And what nature likes is just natural. That's the way it is. They're never rewarded for what we consider to be good behavior.
Mm-hmm.
What's good behavior in nature is that you're not eaten. You stay away from that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's called consequence therapy. And that's what we're going to be doing with him.
Okay.
What you've been practicing with him is liability. You don't want anyone to get hurt. You don't want him to get hurt. That's not how animals learn.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how people learn. We learn through consequences. I know that's how I learn.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that happened to me that we can consider to be bad is really good because it makes me remember what to stay away from.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's suffering from. Now, the flip side of this, I'll go back to this. You doing this, he's going to look as though we would say he's afraid. You gotta let that go past. Because if he's responding to danger, but the danger never gives him a physical something, then he can't hold on to it. He will learn to accept what's happening and become more balanced. Okay?
Okay.
That's all this dog needs. That's all he needs.
Great.
Now, the people aggression is only revolved around the grooming, though, right?
No, not strictly. Like I said, like if we when we're dancing, he'll like get excited and like bite at our feet. With little kids, also like really anytime like there's a like high energy, like if it was a skateboarder or somebody with a weed whacker.
Perfect.
Or like when we had a guy come into our place and like a maintenance man. Attacked his
My
feet.
sister was visiting once and he like went after her feet, not
Oh, did he?
exactly, yeah. Not
Right.
sure why.
Controlling.
Yeah.
It's a control
Okay.
thing.
Okay.
You're walking into my territory, and I'm going to control my territory. And I feel that people are weak, and every time I go for your feet, you run.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's an animal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, they spot fear, and they feed on it because it allows for them to climb.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they survive. Right? So you're going to discipline him for what you never want him to do and dominate to remind him what not to do. What we did today, this morning, was domination. Now we're going to do some discipline. And I'll show you how that's done. Let me explain it to you first. Discipline is a physical thing. And I learned this, did I tell you this morning, through a monkey? Okay. Well, I want to get to it and I'll come back.
Okay.
So I learned this from a monkey. Years ago, I worked in the pet store. Her name was Susie. And back then, you sold everything in the pet store. Just exotic animals, whatever. You can't do it now. It was much more interesting back then. But I understand. Most people shouldn't have them. They just don't know what to do with them. But Susie taught me this little discipline, which I think is great. It has never failed me. So we're going to do the discipline with him, and specifically in the house. This dog is skittish by nature. But the complicated part is he's multi-layered. There's fear aggression, dominance aggression, subdominant aggressiveness, and some dogs are multi-layered. He's got a bit of it all. That's why he's complicated. These are very difficult dogs like this. It's simple, but it's difficult because what we see is not how we should approach it. We see a nice, sweet, fearful dog, and we want to love him and help him until you've been bitten, and then you don't see that dog. You're just like, I want to get you. I want to stop you from doing this. And that's where we are now. So every time I asked you, or you need to discipline or dominate, I want you to think about the things that he has done that's made your life miserable. It's going to help you to do what I need you to do. And I think it's all revolving in the house, right? People coming in.
Not
out on the
strictly,
street?
but typically, yeah. With other people, well, yeah. I mean, like even when we go to my sister's house and they've got like a 2 and 4-year-old.
When they're running around and
Yeah,
getting
just
Yeah,
like
excited.
this is perfect. This is perfect time. I now want you to produce a problem that you have the answers for. It's like a teacher putting something on the board.
I'm going to be doing that later tonight. I'm going to be seeing them. So.
Yeah, create the problems.
Okay.
See, right now you're trying to prevent those things from happening.
Right.
Stay out of the way. That's the liability I'm talking about. Now you're going to produce that problem and be ready for it. Let me go over this again. Animals. The difference between us and animals is that the animal can only look outward. It cannot look inward. The human being can look outward and inward. So whatever happens to us outside in our world is imprinted on us. And then we look inward at that, how it made us feel, and say, you know what? I'm going to change the way I feel. I don't like what this has done for me. When the animal experiences an outside stimulant, it's imprinted on the inside. They can't look at that objectively. They can just react to what it made them feel. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, when you do the discipline and domination that I'm talking about, that's something that's happening on the outside, it's imprinting on the inside, and they're going to go with that feeling. So when they become subordinate and submissive, that's what they're going with. They're not looking at that subordinate, submissive thing and says, I'm not going to deal with that. I don't know what. They don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the ability. They have a top and bottom line, and they live within that. We got a bottom line, but no top line. We can change whatever we want. And the dog expects for us to think like a dog because it can only think like a dog.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else.
Right.
But the human being expects for the dog to understand what we want from it. That's where the complication comes in, because we're communicating with an animal with a top and bottom as though it doesn't have a top. That's the whole problem here. That's why the shelter is filled with animals that are being destroyed, because human beings think like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very selfish way of thinking because we have the ability to think anyway. We can think like a cat, a dog, a horse, whatever. We know their behavior. They can't. That's why we kill so many dogs, because we want them to respond to love and affection, positive reinforcement, and for them to understand why we said sit and stay.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very interesting one. Sit, stay. If I could say, why did you say that? And you would say, well, because he's over here doing this and doing that, right? Now the dog will sit because that's what you taught him to do. And then he expects a treat or to say, good boy.
Mm-hmm.
But what we don't do is tell him why we told him to sit and stay.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. Because the way nature works is when they're doing something that's not liked by nature, that's what they discipline for. Do you get it?
Yeah.
But we say sit, stay, and we expect for them to understand it was because of that. Even a kid would say, Mommy, Daddy, why? Why do I have to sit down? Well, because you're doing this and you're doing that. And they'll say, oh, okay. I won't do it again. But we expect for the dog to understand that. Or maybe we don't even expect it. We just want him to do that, and we don't want to explain it.
I'm curious, is that similar like when we're sitting down eating a meal? He's not obtrusive, he doesn't beg, he just comes and sits right there. Typically, like, I try and just get him to go down, because my thinking was that, like, if he's listening to me, but it seems like more like I have to tell him no, he shouldn't even be in my space at this time, he should be over there.
Is he doing
with
something
me.
wrong?
No. I mean, other than staring at me, but that's fine. Okay.
That's fine.
I mean, it's kind of like I gotta unlearn a lot.
Yeah.
Of stuff.
Only tell your dog what you don't like.
Okay.
Because that means everything else you like until you don't like something else. That's how nature is. Simple.
Mm-hmm.
They get it. We say, oh, I don't like this, I like this. But the thing that you say you do like might be the thing that is making him emboldened to become assertive.
Mm-hmm.
Dog comes up to you, tells you to do something. Then you bring him up. You reward him for being assertive. Then he climbs.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they think.
Mm-hmm.
The leader of a pack, when he goes and pushes or whatever he does to make them whatever, right? That makes him powerful if they do that.
Mm-hmm.
You see? Makes them climb. It's a very subtle climb. Dog comes, pushes your hand up, and then you pet him. So he's assertively telling you to do something, and you're subordinately doing it.
Mm-hmm.
To him, he begins to climb. If you ever play tug of war, if you ever play chase, if you ever roughhouse, any of those kinds of games that tell him to challenge you, then you're telling him to climb. And that's a problem.
What about, I've been watching your videos and I had been like throwing a ball for him. I heard what you were saying, that sort of like ignite or initiates his sort of like
Predator.
Yeah. So I have like once or twice I'll throw his chew toy, like his actual like pizzle, his bone, and just let him go get it and chew on that thing. Is that
okay? Let me kind of explain that again. When you throw an inanimate object that has no nutritional value, it raises the prey drive and makes them neurotic because it never enters the stomach.
Mm-hmm.
Animals chase for two reasons. I'm chasing you out of my territory, or I'm trying to eat you. Unless you're making a working dog, a competition dog, a bird dog, cattle dog, rabbit dog, you shouldn't be creating that neurotic behavior within your dog, because that's not how you live with him.
Right.
You don't ever want him chasing a rabbit, or you don't want your dog chasing anything like that.
Right.
He is a pet. You should be raising him like a service dog. Service dog is walking down the street with a blind person and someone's throwing a tennis ball in the street and he goes after it. That's not going to work. Right? If you want to throw something, throw a treat.
Okay.
He goes after it, puts it in his mouth, he kills it, swallows it. It's inside. That's the period at the end of the sentence.
Okay.
They get that.
Okay.
That's why the lions didn't go after the bushmen,
Mm-hmm.
because they have no history with that.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Right.
So I like to tell people, stop lying to your dog. I mean, I know why. You've been lied to. We've been lied to. The pet stores lie to us. Okay? They trick us. They contribute to the aggression of other dogs. They take a treat or a squeaky toy, which represents a kill, and puts it in a stuffed animal and tells you to give it to your dog. He shakes it and kills it. The Pomeranian moves in next door. He goes after the little Pomeranian, and we say, oh, he's never done anything like this before. You've been grooming him to do this. Don't wake up the prey drive of your animal. His food comes in a can and a bag today. He does not have to hunt to eat, so don't do that.
Okay.
That's not your lifestyle. That's not what you're grooming the dog to be. You want a pet. Okay? So we need to stop lying and say, look, I just want you to love everything and everybody. Well, okay, so now you're here now, right? So you got to go back in time. You have to establish your hierarchy again. You have to change the way he deals with you and other people, at least the immediate people that are around you, so that you can control him hormonally. That's what this is about, you know? You do that, you're gonna get a changed dog. If I could erase your mind. I was just watching a movie. It's called. Oh my gosh, what is it? Anthony Hopkins. It's a movie out now.
Recent one?
Yeah, it's a recent series on television. God,
Oh, maybe Westworld? Or?
Westworld.
Okay.
If I could erase your memory from training, I would do that right now.
Uh-huh.
I would tell you never to tell your dog to sit or to down or to stay. Because every time we say those words, it's really to stop him from doing something else. So we lie. Mm-hmm. Right? Forget about that. It gives us a false sense of security. We think we have control because we can say that. But we don't. Mm-hmm. Just tell them what you don't like. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is. Don't run around. Don't bark. Stop doing that. Consequences are for that. I don't care whether you sit, lie down, or... It's not important to me. Dogs do that when the hormone tells them to. When you're tired, no one has to say lie down. It's the hormone that tells you to. Mm-hmm. If you make him feel subordinate, he will automatically do those things. We saw that this morning. He will automatically stop the whining, and it's going to be hard with the whining because he's been doing that for so long, and you've been rewarding him for it. But I don't want you to let up for it. Okay. Still do it anyway. Mm-hmm. And he'll start to make that change. It would be as if he came to stay with me, right? I wouldn't accept any of that stuff. You're probably doing things unconsciously. Mm-hmm. I would be very conscious about it. Right on top of it. And then he'll let it go. I've had many dogs like that. They come in, as I mentioned to you this morning. And that's all it is with this guy. Okay?
Great.
So let's take a look at that little video that I was telling you about, and then let's talk about that a little bit, and then let's bring him out here.
Okay. Great.